Welcome to Strategies for Success in Business. My name's Dan Kiemeyer, and I'm a financial and small business coach here at S2S Coaching. Let's get started. This course was made for people who are considering starting their own company or considering becoming self-employed, and for folks who maybe tried in the past and weren't successful and want to try again. The intent when I put this course together was to offer hope to those folks that were wanting to start their own business by sharing what I wish I had known when I had gotten started all those years ago. And to let you know that you're not alone and to offer any additional assistance for anyone who thinks they could use it. First, let me share a little bit about my background so you know where I'm coming from. As a child, my father was self-employed, and so I got to see the freedom that came with not having a boss and not working for a company. And that really planted the seed in my mind that I wanted to be self-employed too when I grew up. Right out of high school, I joined the Marine Corps, mostly because I didn't have anywhere else to go, and we didn't have enough money for me to pay to go to college. So I'm really glad that I did, because that was where I learned a lot of my self-discipline, self-esteem, achievement, that kind of stuff. So I definitely do owe a lot to the Marine Corps for the character that it built in me. I did end up going to a year of college using the GI Bill and various other scholarships, but I quickly found that it really wasn't for me. So after a year, I dropped out and just continued to work and pretty much went to the school of hard knocks and just learned everything on the job and worked my way up through the corporate ladder, really. I also got to participate in network marketing for about 4 years or so. Once again, I found it really wasn't right for me. I don't really have the social capital to be successful in that particular arena, but I learned a ton about how to run and operate a business. And a lot of what I'll be sharing today is stuff that I learned through that experience. So I do highly recommend it, if for nothing more than just the training and experience that you get in the mentorship, even if it's not really your cup of tea. What I did find out was that I was very good with technology. In my mid-20s, I found out that I had a natural gifting for working with computers. So what I did is, while I still had a full-time job, I moonlighted fixing people's computers and networks on the evenings and weekends. And that ended up serving me really well, because I was able to make the jump to self-employment in 2009. Now, it wasn't by my own choice per se, because the companies that I worked for kept going out of business and I kept getting laid off. But because I had been moonlighting for about 5 years, I'd already built up enough book of business that I was able to make that jump and work for myself full time. If we fast forward, I was able to, because of the vehicle of self-employment and business ownership, we were able to pay off all of our debt, including the house we live in, and essentially retire by the age of 38, where we no longer have to work if we don't want to. And so now, for the last few years, my wife and I have been able to be full-time spouses, full-time parents, and volunteer with organizations that we are passionate about. One of the first things I wanted to convey with this course is that I really truly believe that anyone can be successful in business. Okay? Understand that all an entrepreneur is someone who takes risk in order to help other people solve their problems. So there's two components. The word entrepreneur is a French word that means one who takes risk. But the other part of it is you have to be in it to help other people. We are problem solvers by nature. As long as you are motivated to solve problems and serve people, you can be successful in business. I get a lot of pushback from people when I share that philosophy. Usually they say, well, I could never do that, or I just can't see myself ever owning a business. That seems too risky. And my response to that is always that, well, for most of human history, up until the Industrial Revolution in the late 1700s, everybody was self-employed. We were all farmers, blacksmiths, lumberjacks. We owned a general store, that kind of stuff. So it's definitely within the capacity of every person to be self-employed and understand that everyone pretty much learned a trade. Usually it was from family, and they operated or worked in a family business for almost all of human history. So don't sell yourself short. I truly believe that you too can be successful at business. We just need to find the right one for you and follow some simple strategies, and you can win as well. Another fundamental philosophy that is very important to understand is that success is a team sport. There's the old cliche that if you want to go fast, you go alone. But if you want to go far, you go together. And the secret to that is being fun to play with. If we were to use a sports analogy, that's actually what attracts the best coaches and teammates to work with you, is being fun to play with. See, understand that no one is successful unless everybody around them wants them to be, because they think that that person deserves it. The recipe for being fun to play with is a combination of competence, meaning being good at what you do and adding value, and reciprocity, which is the willingness to share and help everyone around you. Okay, that's what makes the best team players. You don't want to be the guy on the court, just give me the ball, I'll make all the shots. The best players are the ones that are very good at the sport, but they also share the load with the team. They pass the ball and then they celebrate the victories together. Okay. Understand that all clients really want to know when they're trying to decide whether to work with you or not is A, do they like you? And B, if you can solve their problem. That's it. So what does it take to win in business, you might ask? Well, I've got a spoiler for you. It's actually not money necessarily. See, I started my first company with no money down whatsoever. I think I spent $100 to get my LLC, and that was about it. And that is my most profitable company today. It was all just time and energy put into it. So money is not a barrier to be able to get yourself started on the path. I just want to make that very, very clear. Plus, there are other people that have money that are willing to invest to help someone else start up a company if they have the right combination of character, which is the greatest separator that I have seen between people who win and people who don't win. Honesty is one of the most important ones. Making your words match reality. We don't want to work with people that don't tell the truth or tell half-truths. Integrity is probably the most important one that I would say, because it's very common in an average person's life to say things like, hey, let's get together this weekend, and then to not reach out and not connect and not actually make the appointment. They just say it, but they don't actually follow through. Maybe you're guilty of that. I know I was when I was younger. Well, people who think and act that way generally don't tend to succeed in life or in business. Okay, so integrity is probably the most important one, and that's making reality match your words. So these are really two sides of the same coin if you think about it. You do need to have perseverance, and that's a willingness to fail forward, understanding that you're going to fail. Failure is actually part of success. It is not the opposite of success. The opposite of success is actually mediocrity. So understand that you're going to fail, but be sure to fail forward. Use it as a teacher to learn from it. And you need to do that with humility. Understand we're all lifelong learners here. I don't have it all figured out. My mentor doesn't have it all figured out. You're not going to have it all figured out either. Just be okay with that. And have the humility to learn from other people and from your mistakes. Continue to fail forward, and you will be successful. People who really succeed in really anything, their career, business, it doesn't matter. They live on purpose. If you ever read the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Dr. Covey, his first habit is this intentionality, this intentional living on purpose. It's an absolute must, because only people who live on purpose will set goals and work towards them, measure their progress and whatnot. So very, very important. And lastly, discipline. And that's having the maturity to delay gratification. We live in a world full of credit cards and 90 days same as cash and buy now, pay later. And we get into this trap of, well, I want it now. I'll pay a higher price for it, or my future self will pay for it. You just can't do that with a business. taking out a huge loan and getting started is just a recipe for disaster. So this is what I have come to believe is the recipe necessary to succeed in business. So it's not money, it's character. So if that's not you, commit to developing all of these character traits as we go forward. A question I get asked a lot in my coaching sessions when we're talking about starting businesses is, what type of business should I start? Should I start a coffee shop? Should I start a yoga shop? Whatever. From my perspective, there really needs to be a combination of three things to give someone the highest probability of success. The first being passion. You need to have a passion for whatever the business provides as a service or a product. Now, that word passion gets thrown around a lot, so I want to kind of clarify what I mean by it. From my experience, you're passionate about something if you're willing to do it for free. In my particular case, I found that I was very passionate about working on people's computers. I loved doing things for people that they were unable to do themselves. And if you maybe aren't a computer person, you probably think computers work on magic or something, or they're like a black box and takes voodoo and whatnot. Well, for me, it makes a lot of sense to do that because I gain a lot of energy by serving people in that way. I'm very passionate about doing things for others that they can't do for themselves, which brings me to the second component, which is gifting. I mentioned before that I'm very naturally gifted with working with technology for some reason. I didn't even know that until my mid-20s when I got introduced to it and realized that it was like as easy as breathing to me, and it still is all these years later. So I'm passionate about doing things for others that they can't do for themselves. I have a natural gifting with technology. And then the third component is market value, meaning is someone willing to pay for whatever that is? So using me as the example, I'm passionate about doing something for people that they can't do for themselves. I'm very naturally gifted with computers. It's as easy as breathing to me, and you have things in your life that come as easy as breathing to you as well. You need to find out what those are. And it happens to be something that people are willing to pay for. So for me, that was my ideal company to start. And that was the first company that I started. Now you'll notice that there are other areas that maybe two of them intersect, like passion and gifting. In those cases, like let's say you're very passionate about yoga and you're very gifted in it, but people aren't willing to really pay for it. You know, maybe in your market where you live, there aren't a lot of people that are interested in yoga, so you can't really make a living that way. Well, that should be a hobby for you because you should still get the benefit of doing it, the energy that it gives you, right? To pursue that passion with your gifting. But maybe you're not going to make a living on it, so that should be a hobby. Likewise, you should volunteer if you're passionate about something that is valuable, but maybe you're not naturally gifted. So I volunteer as a ambulance driver, as an example. There's value in that, obviously. I'm passionate about doing things for people that they can't do for themselves, but I really don't have any natural gifting for it. I just do it because my wife volunteers as an EMT. That's where she's really passionate, and I'm passionate about being with her and sharing that experience with her. And then also, it's fine to have a job that you're not passionate about, as long as you have a gifting that is valuable to the market, because you can still earn a living while starting your company in that central area where all three things combined. The job will serve a purpose temporarily while you get your company off the ground. I think it's common knowledge that 9 out of 10 new businesses close within the first 5 years. In this next section, we're going to talk about why that happens and how we can avoid it. The first thing to understand is that businesses don't fail. People do. If you recall from earlier, I mentioned that character is the great separator between those who succeed and those who don't in business. For examples, you can think of like a landscaping company. Why do some landscaping companies stay in business while others don't? Obviously, there's a demand for landscaping in the area. Otherwise, the ones that survive wouldn't survive. It has to do with the thought processes and habits of the owners. The most common reasons that companies don't make it is poor cash flow management and growing beyond the owner's ability to manage the business. Both of them are habits-based and mindset-based. And understand that the only ships that sink the most are partnerships. And we're going to talk about all of these here in the coming slides. All right, so let's get into the actual strategies that we can use to win in business. First and foremost, before you even get started, you need to have your financial house in order, because the main reason companies fail is because the owners bring their poor money management habits with them into the business when they start it. If you've ever heard horror stories of people who ended up being landlords and they hated it, it's almost always because they did not manage the money properly. And so they didn't have enough margin to take care of an expensive repair that came up that they weren't expecting, and they had to put it on a credit card or something like that, and it ended up being a disaster. But if you manage the money properly first, business pretty much takes care of itself. Okay. I've also put together my own strategy that I call the 5S strategy, because it's 5 things that start with the letter S. So let's get into that. I say always keep things simple, keep it sustainable from the get-go, scalable, meaning you can scale up and down, service-oriented, meaning we're going to focus on serving others, and always start small to keep the stakes low. Okay. And lastly, don't do the right deal with the wrong people. I've lost so much money from learning this particular lesson by doing business with people who ended up stealing from me. Okay. So I want to make sure that I convey that to you so that you don't make some of the same mistakes that I did. Okay. So now let's unpack each of those individually. I'm going to start by talking about some of the things that I've learned about managing money properly. Here are some simple habits that I've found to really help with managing money and helping you win in business as well. I can't stress enough that this really needs to be done before you get into business, because this will hamstring you from the get-go if you don't. First, I suggest using a financial statement, keeping track of everything, the money that flows in and out of the business and your household. Okay. That's really just a combination of your budget and a balance sheet, which has all your assets and liabilities on it. You always want to maintain an emergency fund, a few $1,000s. It varies by household and business. Basically, a good rule of thumb is 3 to 6 months of all of your expenses. You always want to stay away from bad debt. Bad debt is loans taken out on anything that goes down in value. So like a car, that kind of stuff. A good debt obviously would be something that goes up in value. So maybe like rental properties and whatnot. You want to avoid debt at all costs whenever you can. And try to use sinking funds for large expenses. Like let's say you have a rental property, you know it's going to need a roof in 10 years. You're going to save a certain amount every month over those next 10 years so that you can pay cash for that roof when you need it. And always learn to invest. It's a bit of an education that we're not taught in school, unfortunately, but learning how to invest for the long term is what will secure your future as an entrepreneur. You can't just be thinking about today. We always have to think about the future as well. Now let's unpack that 5S strategy that I mentioned earlier. It's important that you keep your entire business model as simple as possible. This does a few things for us. Firstly, it minimizes the room for errors. If the processes are really complicated, your team members are going to have a really hard time replicating it each time. So we want to minimize the room for errors, because errors cost money and time. Likewise, it allows you to focus on doing less things with excellence rather than a whole bunch of things with mediocrity. I'm always impressed when I go to a restaurant and they have a very small menu, because I know that the people who work there make those items on the menu 100 times a day. So I know that they're going to be very, very good at them. It also has the added benefit of minimizing the investment required to train new people. Because if you don't have a whole lot of complex systems to train them on, it doesn't take you as much time and money to onboard somebody new. Whenever you're developing your systems in your business, it's important to also make sure that they are sustainable. What do I mean by that? Sustainability means that every activity should produce profit or some kind of value to the organization. You don't want to have salespeople generating sales and making money, but then another department that is just sucking money and completely just costing money. You want that department to also produce some kind of profit as well. Your spending should also be closely monitored. That way you can prevent financial cancer. A lot of times companies will hemorrhage out money because they're not monitoring how the money is managed internally. Are people going out to dinner and putting it on the company card? Well, that needs to be generating some kind of value, meeting with a customer or something like that. But if you're not monitoring it, your employees might be just taking themselves and their wife to dinner on the company card, that kind of stuff. Very important to manage the money. And eventually, the business also needs to be able to run without you. So it's very important. A lot of companies end up, the owner tries to do everything, usually because of fear, like they don't trust people enough. And so they're not willing to give authority and a long leash to people. And in order for a company to live for a long period of time, it also needs to run without you. So you always need to have that in mind when you're developing your company. It needs to be able to run without you there. So always have that in the back of your mind. I mentioned earlier that the second biggest reason companies don't make it is because the management, the ownership, isn't able to properly manage growth. Okay? So scalability, having a mindset of scalability, overcomes that. What are we talking about here? You should be able to scale the business in both directions in order to handle whatever the situation dictates. Most companies grow year over year, and so you want to make sure the systems are simple enough to be able to train new people as needed. You want the company to be able to operate without you, so it's able to grow beyond what you can manage all by yourself. But also you need to be able to scale down. That means don't be buying big buildings and whatnot, and then if something like the coronavirus hits and now you can't work in the building, that you have no ability to scale back and allow people to work from home. So, for instance, my technology company, we already worked from home so that when COVID hit, it really didn't impact us at all. We were able to scale down our operation without any really additional cost or anything because we were already had scalability in mind by allowing people to work from home. Success can be characterized by controlled acceleration. That was a phrase that I was taught by one of my mentors. So the character trait of a properly managed organization in life is controlled acceleration. Acceleration meaning we're growing, we're moving, going forward, but it's under control. It's not like totally unmanageable and whatnot. Simplicity and sustainability, like I mentioned before, is going to help facilitate your ability to right size as the situation arises, just like I mentioned earlier. Unfortunately, it's pretty easy to get into the trap of thinking that our business exists to serve us. And I spoke about that when I was talking about the character traits really required to be successful, is that we need to be reciprocal, meaning we have to be serving of others around us. You can have everything in life that you want if you just help enough other people get what they want first. That's a famous line from Zig Ziglar, and he was totally right. We live in a world of sowing and reaping. The sowing, which is the serving, that's the work. And the reaping, the money, is automatic. But you have to be willing to do the work up front, to focus on serving others, knowing that the money takes care of itself. Sometimes we harvest in a different place than we plant. Like maybe we're trying to land a certain deal and it doesn't end up happening, but then we'll land a deal somewhere else that maybe we weren't trying so hard. But just know that putting in the effort, serving people where they're at, you will get rewarded eventually. It just may not show up where you expect. It's important to just keep going, no matter what happens. Lastly, I always suggest people try to start small. There's a few different reasons for this. If you start small, you can keep working at a job while getting your business off the ground. That way you can avoid debt, you can bootstrap it, use the money from your day job to be able to give you the startup capital if any is required, like if you have to buy materials and whatnot. An example would be like if you want to start a restaurant, well, start with a food truck, something small, or a catering business. That way you can learn all the lessons while the stakes are lower. You haven't bought a building or anything like that. You haven't bought all the equipment, but you can find out what works and what doesn't. What are people buying and what aren't people buying? And that way you can kind of tinker with the formula that you're using before you scale bigger and spend a large amount of money or take out a loan, that kind of stuff. So always start small in whatever you're doing. And the internet allows us to do that a lot with a lot of industries now too. So leverage technology whenever you can. One of the other things I've learned is that business moves at the speed of trust. And I wanted to share some of the experiences I've had that have helped me learn that. I mentioned at the beginning of this course that partnerships are the ships that sink the most. So how do we figure out who's worth partnering with? Who can we trust? The first thing that I would suggest looking for is ask them if they have and use a financial statement. Are they managing money properly? And are they willing to share it with you? Are they willing to let you look at their numbers? That'll tell you a lot about a person right out of the gate. Because if they're not managing their money well, or they're embarrassed to share how they're managing money, they're probably not somebody you want to do business with. Likewise, the word trust really has three ingredients, the concept of trust. First, you want to know what their track record is. Do they have a reputation for being a con artist, that kind of thing? I actually ended up doing business with somebody who had a record, and I didn't know it up front, and they ended up doing the exact same thing to me. Are they competent at what they do? In other words, can they actually accomplish what they claim that they can accomplish? And are they sincere? Do they really mean what they say? Now, obviously, that's a judgment call you have to make, but these are the three ingredients. Do they have a track record? Their reputation, that is. Are they competent? And are they sincere? You have to be able to answer those questions before you do business with somebody. Another good question to ask them is, have they ever failed before? You never want to be somebody's first failure. You want them to have already learned some lessons before they work with you. And there's an old cliche that you don't want to trust anyone that doesn't walk with a limp, a metaphoric limp. Like they've been through it, they've been there, they've made the mistakes, they're not going to do it again. At this point, I thought it might be worth sharing just some of the failures I've had with partnerships in the past. With my technology company, we had a relationship with a company that would provide hardware. And there was one example where we paid the vendor a few $1,000s to buy computers for one of our customers. And he ended up just spending the money immediately and then lost the ability to actually acquire the computers that we needed. So I was like, well, that's no big deal. Just give me back the money. And he's like, well, we had already spent it. And he was not able to give me my money back. And so we ended up losing the money, not getting the computers. I ended up suing that guy. He went bankrupt. And so nobody won. So that was an example where I learned to make sure that they manage their money properly before trusting them. I also did a car resale venture with somebody. This was just a joint venture with an individual who went to the car auction. I provided the cash up front. The idea was that we would flip the car and split the profits. Real simple. Well, he ended up selling the vehicle for like twice what we paid for it, and he just kept all the money for himself and paid off loans or whatever he did with it because he was broke, and I had to sue him as well, and he just filed bankruptcy and I lost all my money. So I was out another couple thousand just from the lawsuit as well. So another case where I really should have checked to see if the guy managed money properly first before doing business. I also was a partner with a co-working space, which is like Think like people renting office space, but it's not their permanent. They share it with other people. And the partner was once again not very good at managing money, so he kept trying to take any profits we would make rather than allow me to keep the money in savings so that we could handle any maintenance or emergencies that would come up. And he ended up skipping town, taking all the money out of the account and just leaving. And our poor tenants who had paid like deposits and stuff, we didn't even have the money to give them back their deposits when they left. So once again, don't do business with people who do not manage money well. I also did a fractional investor ownership program. That's what FIOP stands for, in a real estate venture where I provided all the upfront capital, quite a bit of money to make these initial down payments on all these properties. And the person my partner did not manage the properties properly, and we ended up losing. They went into foreclosure and whatnot, and we lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in that deal. So the overarching lesson here is to only do business with people who manage money well first. Because once again, that was what killed us pretty much every single time. Don't do business with people who do not manage money well. Now, that also means if you don't manage money well, you're probably not a very good business partner. And so I suggest that you get that stuff sorted out before going into business. Okay, let's review. I cannot stress enough. You need to practice sound financial habits before considering going into business. If you bring poor money habits into a company, it is a death sentence. So it's not even worth starting until you've got that sorted. Once you're ready to start your company, I suggest using the 5S strategy. Make sure that the systems that you put in place are simple, sustainable, scalable, service-oriented, and be sure to start small. Keep the stakes low at first until you gain some confidence and learn some lessons. And lastly, you can't do it alone, but make sure that you don't do the right deal with the wrong people. Make sure that you're only partnering with other people who follow similar strategies, and that way you can all win together. That does it for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it and that you got something out of it. And if you have any specific questions for me, or if you'd like coaching with either finances or business, feel free to drop me a line at the email on the screen. Thanks again for watching, and I look forward to hearing from you.